The Desert's Blessing, a mysterious girl, a forgotten verse, and a love that defied death itself. Inspired by Surah Quraysh, this story will haunt your heart and awaken your soul. The desert had always been silent, but silence in the desert wasn't empty. It was full of ancient memories, of forgotten footsteps, of the wind that carried prayers and curses alike. And in this desert stood a powerful tribe, Quraysh. They were respected across the land. Every season, their caravans left for trade, north in summer, south in winter. They brought back spices, silk, gold, and stories. Stories that made their children dream and their enemies jealous. Quraysh were not just rich, they were safe. No one dared harm them. Even the wild animals seemed to leave them alone. Why? Because they lived in the city of Mecca. And in the heart of Mecca stood something older than any kingdom, the Kaaba, the house of God. But something had changed. Their prayers had become shorter, their hearts harder. The poor sat outside the gates, begging for crumbs while the rich feasted. Even the Kaaba, once filled with the sounds of worship, now echoed with silence. The Quraysh had become too proud, too used to comfort, too blind to remember who gave them peace. Among them was a young man named Zayd. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He worked with camels, guiding them across the dunes, feeding them, sleeping under their shadows. His eyes were gentle, like someone who had lost something he couldn't name. While others laughed in market squares, Zayd sat alone, staring at the Kaaba, as if waiting for it to speak. One cold evening, Zayd returned from the desert alone. He had left with a caravan of 50 men. He came back with bleeding feet and broken silence. The elders surrounded him. "What happened?" one asked. Zayd's lips trembled. "They're gone. All of them. The sands took them." They didn't believe him. But Zayd wasn't lying. He remembered it too clearly. The caravan had stopped near a dry valley. The night had been strange. No stars, no wind, just stillness. And then, the whispers began. Soft at first, like someone breathing near your neck. Then louder, calling names, screaming in a tongue no man should know. Men ran, camels screamed, fires blew out by themselves. And when morning came, only Zayd remained. He didn't run. He didn't move. He just listened to the whispers fade, like smoke in a storm. The elders blamed him, said he brought bad luck, said he angered the spirits. Zayd didn't argue. He simply returned to his lonely corner of the city, praying silently to a God he still believed in, even if no one else seemed to. Then she came. It was late at night. Zayd was walking near the edge of the city, where the desert met the rocks. He heard crying, a soft sob, like a child left behind. He followed the sound and saw her, curled up under a dry tree, barefoot, bruised, and shaking. A girl. She couldn't have been older than 20. Her face was hidden, but her hair was covered in dust. Her clothes were torn, and her eyes were full of pain and fear and something else. Secrets. Zayd knelt beside her. "Are you lost?" She looked at him. "No. I ran." "From where?" She whispered something. It didn't sound like any tribe he knew. Then she fainted. Zayd carried her back to his tent. He gave her water, food, and silence. He didn't ask more questions. Not yet. When she woke the next day, she stared at the Kaaba through the tent's flap. "Do they still remember?" she asked. "Remember what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "My name is Layla, and I shouldn't be here." Zayd blinked. "Why?" because wherever I go, they follow. Who? She turned to him slowly. The ones who whisper. Zayd's heart froze. She knew. Layla stayed in his tent, hidden from the tribe. Zayd told no one, but the city began to change. At first, small things. A well dried up overnight. A baby goat was born without eyes. The wind started blowing from the wrong direction, but no one connected it. Then a child went missing. Then another. The markets grew quiet. The rich stopped laughing. The beggars cried louder. Zayd listened to Layla. She spoke of her people, once a great tribe from the north, blessed like Quraysh, rich, protected, proud. But they forgot gratitude. They forgot God. They turned their prayers into performances, their kindness into business. And then, the curse came. First it was hunger, then fear, then madness, and finally, the whispers. Layla was the last to leave. Or rather, she ran. She said she wasn't cursed, but she carried the memory of her people. And the whispers followed her, feeding on the ingratitude of the next tribe. I came here because I saw the signs, she said. Quraysh is becoming like us. Zayd wanted to tell someone, but who would believe him? They already thought he was mad. And besides, he had started to care for her. Deeply. There was something in her pain that felt familiar. Then came the scream. It tore through the city like fire. A mother, wailing. Her son, missing. And on the wall of the Kaaba, someone had carved words in dried blood. You forgot him. Now he forgets you. The tribe gathered. They called for answers, for action. An elder stood and shouted, there is a demon among us, a stranger, a cursed girl hiding in our midst. Zayd's blood turned cold. They knew. He ran to his tent. Layla was gone, but written in ash on the sand were 5 words. Meet me where the wind stops. Zayd knew what it meant. There was only one place where the wind never blew, a dead valley, cursed and dry, where no animals dared to walk. That night, Zayd left. He didn't pack much, just a water skin, a blade, and the broken pieces of his faith. He walked alone, into silence, into darkness, into the arms of something ancient, something hungry. The desert looked different at night. The stars were gone, hidden behind clouds that didn't move. Even the moon was only a pale ghost in the sky. Zayd walked in silence, his feet sinking into the cold sand. Every step took him further from his people, and closer to something he couldn't understand. He followed the signs, cracked stones shaped like arrows, scratches in the sand that looked like letters, and always, that strange stillness. No wind, no sounds, not even the chirp of a night insect. Finally, he reached it, the valley of no wind. It was just as Layla had said, dry, dead, and cursed. Trees without leaves stood like skeletons. Rocks were blackened, as if burned from within. The air felt thick, like it didn't want to be breathed. And in the center of the valley, on a flat stone, sat Layla. She looked even paler than before. Her hair fell around her face like smoke. Her eyes were filled with tears. You came, she whispered. Zayd nodded. I had to. They will come soon. Who? She looked into the darkness. The ones who whisper. They never stop. They wait for gratitude to disappear. Then they feast. Zayd stepped closer. Why did you leave? To protect you, she said. I was afraid. I didn't want them to hurt you. Zayd shook his head. I'm not afraid anymore. She smiled. a broken, tired smile. Then the whispers began. First, a single voice, soft, hissing, far away, then more, dozens, hundreds, from all directions. Zayd turned, but there was no one there. Just shadows, moving without shape, crawling across the rocks, floating above the ground. Whispers filled his ears, names, lies, screams, secrets. They never thanked him. They chose gold over grace. Let them starve in silence. Zayd dropped to his knees. His head throbbed. His hands shook. Layla placed her hand on his shoulder. "They're showing you what happened to my people." And then he saw it. A vision. A proud city. Tall buildings. Rich markets. Laughter in the air. But no one prayed. No one fed the poor. They worshipped idols of silver and stone. They mocked the weak. They forgot the Lord who gave them safety and food. Then, darkness. The skies turned black. Crops died. Children wept. People fought for bread, for water, for mercy. And the whispers came. Not just voices, things. Twisted creatures with no faces. Long arms. Empty eyes. They entered homes. Sat beside fires. Climbed into cradles. And when the last prayer was whispered, it was too late. The city crumbled. And the people faded into ash. Zayd gasped and fell forward. The vision ended. He was back in the valley. His heart raced. His hands were bleeding. Layla helped him sit up. "Now you know," she said. "This is what happens when people forget why they were safe." Why are they coming here now? Because Quraysh is walking the same path. They think their safety is from trade, from status, from fear. But it's not. It was always from him. And now they've turned away. Zayd looked at her. Then we need to warn them. It's too late for most, but not for all. Suddenly, the shadows screamed. A loud, horrible screech filled the valley. The ground shook. The air twisted. Layla stood and pulled Zayd to his feet. "They're coming closer. We need to run." They ran through the valley, but the whispers followed. Faster. Louder. One shadow grabbed Zayd's ankle. He slashed it with his blade, but the shadow melted and returned stronger. Layla stopped and turned. She raised her hands, and she spoke. Not in Arabic, not in any human language, but the shadows understood. They screamed again, but this time in pain. They backed away. Zayd stared. "What are you?" Layla looked at him with tears. "I'm not human, Zayd. I was never fully human. I was born from mercy, a part of a tribe that was warned. I was made to remember the pain and carry it. You're a sign." She nodded. "I was sent to test Quraysh, to see if they would remember, to see if one heart, just one, would still beat for the truth." Zayd stepped forward. "Then I'll go back. I'll tell them. They won't listen. Maybe not. But someone will." The shadows circled them. Zayd stood tall. "You will not take this city. Not while I live." Layla closed her eyes. "Then remember this. Only gratitude brings peace. Only remembrance brings safety." She touched his forehead. A light burned in his mind. He heard the verse of Surah Quraysh. "Let them worship the Lord of this house, who fed them against hunger, and secured them from fear." Zayd opened his eyes. The valley was empty. Layla was gone. And in the silence, the wind blew again. He walked back, through desert, through silence, to a city full of fear. But he was no longer afraid. The city of Makkah no longer felt like home. Zayd returned just as the sun was rising. But instead of warmth, he saw fear. The streets were empty. Doors were shut tight. Smoke curled from ruined tents. People whispered behind curtains. A strange sickness had spread, not in the body, but in the heart. The tribe of Quraysh was no longer proud. They were frightened. They were confused. But they still did not remember. Zayd walked through the streets with heavy steps. His clothes were torn. His hands still stained from the valley. His eyes full of fire. He passed the market square. A woman was kneeling in the dust, crying. Her child had disappeared 3 nights ago. No one helped her. The merchants looked away. The guards said nothing. Zayd clenched his fists. He stepped into the center of the square and shouted, "Listen to me, all of you." A few heads turned. Most kept walking. "I've seen what's coming. I've seen the darkness that waits for you. I've seen what happens when we forget the one who gave us everything." A man laughed bitterly. "What do you know, camel boy?" Zayd didn't blink. "I know that you think your wealth protects you, that your trade brings peace. But it doesn't. It never did. It was his mercy, and you spit on it." The crowd began to gather. Some angry, some curious, some afraid. Zayd continued, louder now. "We forgot to be thankful. We forgot to feed the poor. We forgot to pray. We built walls around the Kaaba, but left our hearts empty." An elder stepped forward. His face was red with anger. "You dare speak like this? Who gave you the right?" Zayd looked at him. He did. And then he spoke the verse. Loud, clear, each word hitting the crowd like thunder. "Let them worship the Lord of this house, who fed them against hunger, and secured them from fear." Silence. The people stared. Some gasped. Some cried. It was the first time in years anyone had said those words aloud in the city square. Zayd took a step forward. This verse, Surah Quraysh, was a gift. A reminder. It told us what to do. It warned us what would happen if we forgot. Another voice called out, trembling, "But it's too late, isn't it?" "No," Zayd said. "Not yet. We still have time. But we must act. Now." That night, something changed. Zayd went door to door. He gathered the poor, the widows, the orphans. He brought them food. He sat with them, prayed with them. Others joined him. Slowly at first, then many. People began to speak the verse again, not just with their mouths, but with their hearts. They remembered. And the Kaaba, it began to glow again, not with gold, but with prayers. But not everyone accepted it. A group of powerful men, angry at the shift, planned to stop Zayd. They called him a madman. They accused him of bringing the curse. They said, "There is no proof, just his words and desert dust." But Zayd stood in the center of the city again. He said nothing this time. He simply lit a fire. And from the smoke, something appeared. Layla. Not her body, not her voice, but a vision. Soft, glowing. She looked at the crowd, tears in her eyes. And then she spoke only one sentence. "When you remember him, he remembers you." Then she vanished. The crowd fell to their knees. Even the ones who hated Zayd. Even the ones who had forgotten. They wept. They prayed. They asked for mercy. And the wind carried their cries into the night. Zayd became a servant of the Kaaba. He refused gold, refused fame. He simply cleaned the floor, lit the lamps, and repeated the verse every morning at sunrise. People would gather to listen. Children would memorize it. Merchants would stop before trade. Mothers would whisper it into the ears of newborns. The city began to change. Fewer poor in the streets. More prayers in the air. The sickness faded. The whispers stopped. And for the first time in years, Mecca felt safe again. But Zayd was not at peace. He still missed her. Layla, the girl with the haunted eyes. The test that saved a city. One night, many years later, an old man came to Zayd's tent. He said, "You were right. You gave us the truth. You saved us." Zayd shook his head. "I only reminded you." The man asked, "Who was she?" Zayd smiled. "Mercy." And far in the valley where the wind once stopped, a single tree had grown. Under it, written in soft sand, were the words, "Only gratitude brings peace." The air over Mecca was cooler than it had been in years. The sun still shone bright, but the fire of fear that had wrapped the city had softened. Birds returned. Children laughed again. Water flowed in dry places. It was as if the city was finally breathing, after holding its breath for far too long. But even in peace, memories of horror remained. And so did Zayd. He had become something more than just a man. To many, he was a voice of truth. To some, he was a threat to power. To the children, he was the man who told stories about a girl from the valley and the whispers that faded when people remembered who they were. But to himself, he was only one thing, a servant. Each morning before dawn, Zayd stood before the Kaaba and whispered the same verse. "Let them worship the Lord of this house, who fed them against hunger, and secured them from fear." He didn't speak for attention. He didn't expect crowds. But every morning, more people joined him. They brought their children. They brought food for the poor. They brought tears, and left with peace. One evening, as the last colors of sunset painted the sky, Zayd sat beneath the same tree where Layla had once rested. He closed his eyes and listened. For a moment, he thought he heard it again, the gentle whisper of her voice. Zayd. His heart stopped. He opened his eyes. No one. Just the wind brushing through the leaves. But he smiled. He had grown old. His beard had turned gray. His hands trembled when he worked. But his heart was strong, because it carried her memory. That same week, a group of elders approached him. They bowed their heads. One of them said, "We wish to build a new school beside the Kaaba, a place where children learn the verses, especially yours." Zayd smiled. "It is not mine. It was always his." They nodded. Then one of them said softly, "Tell us again about her." Zayd looked up at the stars. She came from silence. She carried the pain of a forgotten people. She spoke of hunger and fear, but also love and light. She was not meant to stay. She was meant to remind. He paused. "She reminded me how deep love can go. Not the love of holding hands, but the love that holds truth, even when it hurts." The elders sat with him until night covered the land. And Zayd told them everything. About the valley, about the spirits, about the curse, and about the moment the verse returned to the city like a heartbeat after death. That night, he dreamed of her, Layla, in the same white dress, smiling. "You did it," she said. "No," he replied. "We did." She reached out, and when he touched her hand, it was warm. The sky behind her opened, and light poured through. Then he woke. The next morning, they found Zayd kneeling before the Kaaba. His hands were folded, his eyes closed, a soft smile on his face. And though he had stopped breathing, his lips still moved. Let them worship the Lord of this house, who fed them against hunger and secured them from fear. The city mourned. All of Makkah gathered. They washed him with rose water. They buried him near the tree Layla had once touched. On his grave, they placed a stone with one sentence. He remembered, and so he was remembered. Years passed. Children grew up learning his name. The school was built. Poets sang of the man who loved a girl from the shadows and taught a city to love God again. And every year, on the day of his death, the city gathered under the stars. They lit lanterns. They read the verse aloud. And sometimes, if the wind was quiet, they heard it again, Layla's voice. Only gratitude brings peace. Years had passed since the wind first carried the curse and the verse into the hearts of the people of Makkah. Now, the city looked different, felt different, not just in its buildings or markets, but in the way people spoke, walked, prayed. And every street, every stone, every silent prayer remembered Zayd. Children who never met him still spoke of him as if he were a legend. Merchants told their sons, "Be honest like Zayd." Widows told their daughters, "Pray like Zayd." Travelers from other cities heard stories of the whispering curse, of the girl from the valley, of the verse that returned life to a dying tribe. But none knew the story as deeply as the one man who returned every year to sit under the tree. He was no longer young. His name was Talib, a boy who had once been lost in the darkness of that cursed night. The child who had vanished and returned. People thought he had died, but in truth, he had wandered, alone, scared, until a soft voice called to him in the dark. "Don't be afraid. He still remembers you." And then, he was safe. He never told anyone what he saw, except Zayd. And now, years later, Talib had become a man of knowledge, of deep belief, of quiet strength. Every year, he came to Zayd's grave. Every year, he brought roses. And every year, he whispered the verse, "Let them worship the Lord of this house, who fed them against hunger and secured them from fear." He sat one day under the tree when a young girl approached him, her eyes wide, her voice soft. "Is it true," she asked, "that the wind once stopped?" Talib looked at her, smiling. "Yes." And when the people forgot who gave them peace, the wind brought whispers. "Is it true someone saved the city?" Talib nodded. "A man with no army, just a heart full of truth." "And a girl?" the child asked. He looked up at the tree, its branches dancing. "Yes," he whispered. "She came from sorrow and became a sign." The girl sat beside him. "Do you think she was real?" Talib paused. "She was more than real. She was mercy sent in a beautiful form. She reminded us what happens when love and worship fade, and what happens when we return to both." That night, a storm came. Heavy winds, flashing skies. People rushed indoors. But then, something strange happened. The wind suddenly stopped, just like all those years ago. And in the silence, the Kaaba glowed brighter than ever before. Not from torches, not from fire, but from hearts. People poured into the courtyard, barefoot, heads bowed. No merchants, no guards, no speeches, just one voice. A young boy stood on the steps of the Kaaba, his voice shaking but strong. He began, "Let them worship the Lord of this house." And before he could finish, hundreds joined him, together. as one voice, as one tribe, as one heart. At that moment, somewhere beyond the mountains, beyond the sands, in a valley where no wind once blew, a figure stood under a tree. Her hair floated gently, her eyes watched the stars, and beside her stood Zayd, not old, not tired, smiling. They held hands. Layla turned to him. They remembered. Zayd nodded. They worshipped. She looked to the sky. Then our story is complete. And with that, the wind returned, not cold, not cruel, but soft, warm, like a blessing. It swept through the valley, across the desert, into Mecca, into every heart that once forgot, and now remembered. Final message. The story of Surah Quraysh is not just about a tribe. It is about every heart that forgets who feeds it, who protects it, who loves it. When people become arrogant, when they ignore the hungry, when they forget prayer, they risk everything. But when they return, even after the darkest silence, mercy returns with them. If this story touched you, made you feel something deeper, or reminded you of a forgotten truth, don't let it end here. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now for more emotional, spiritual, and soul-shaking stories that stay with you long after the last word. Your next journey begins with one click. Let's walk it together.